According to world-renowned narcissism expert Dr. Ramani Durvasula, narcissists take a major toll on our mental and emotional health. Narcissists are very difficult to spot, yet they instill intense feelings of low self-worth, insecurity, and depression in their victims.
What I am seeing in my office with my consultation clients, it's horrifying. And these are people who are lovely, smart, wise, kind, thoughtful, who completely silence themselves, who cut off their own wings. But these people, their health is falling apart. This isn't just like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Their health, the stress, the effect on their health in every possible way. People getting sicknesses that don't make sense, they make sense to me. Being in the proximity of someone who's behaving in such a toxic manner is a problem.
I feel like I hear more about narcissistic mothers than I do fathers from the peripheral.
A narcissistic mother is so impactful because in many families, the mother is often a primary caregiver.
Right.
That they get more face time with her. And as a result, if she's narcissistic, the impacts may be more significantly felt. You know, it's interesting. When they look back on their childhoods, it's as though they thought, well, this is how mom always was. Mom was always selfish. Dad never showed emotion. Dad was never empathic. You know, my parents were always entitled. It's the alwaysness of it that makes it hard. So it's looking at what we always look at in narcissism. We look at, were they empathic? Were they able to talk about emotions? Were they able to go deep with their kids? One thing that narcissistic family systems are characterized is by parents who focus a lot on achievement and how their child looks and how they look to the community. In some cases, with a really narcissistic parent, they may favor the child who more physically resembles them. And in narcissistic families, it's not unusual to have some really complicated dynamics where one child, or maybe more than one child, but typically one, becomes the scapegoat. Something about them is not pleasing the narcissistic parent. Yes. And it could either be at the level that they don't feel like that child's good enough, or that kid may be a threat. But they scapegoat that child, or and we'll also see in these systems, the golden child. The child that is viewed as the one who represents. Who is emblematic of all that narcissistic parent values. And they'll put a disproportionate resource in that child. The scapegoat child in the system can show all the kinds of symptoms you might see in a child who's been exposed to childhood neglect or abuse. They may be very untrusting. You'll see children in the system trying to protect siblings from narcissistic parents. It gets really, really complicated.
And one can grow into a narcissist and the other one can not have that same path. Why and how is that happening?
Things like birth order, you know, what the children mean to the parents. Boys may be treated differently by girls. We know there's some sort of genetic elements to temperament. Some kids are more tightly wound, impulsive, hypersensitive, the things that could potentially be more predictive of narcissism. Was something going on in the parent's life during one child's childhood and not another? So there's a lot of things that could be at play. But it happens all the time. And Kyle, it's actually one of the more heartbreaking narcissistic relationships people deal with. Because when you were very small, this was your playmate. You know, I always say that your sibling is sometimes your only shared historian. There's pictures of you in the bath together. Like, they were your first playmate in some cases. And so the idea that you will be estranged from them or not have that relationship, a lot of people become angry. They have to grieve it. Like, this isn't fair. I want a cool sibling relationship. And so it can actually be a really devastating recognition. Many of them say, you know, I hate to admit it, and I can understand why they wouldn't over-pathologize in childhood. They're like, I want this person to be my friend. It's always been fraught. But in adulthood, this is a relationship that can get downright ugly. And I don't think people are prepared for that. For example, things like as your parents get older, there's issues like trusts, estates, wills, who gets more money. Mom and dad paid for you to go to law school. I expect them to spend this much money on a down payment for a house or on my wedding. That narcissistic sibling often keeps score. They gave you that, they should give me this. And so they'll try to outdo you. It's a lot of trying to outplay the other sibling, but it can actually get really dark as the parents get older, where there's a lot of sort of fooling around about family finances, the narcissistic sibling feeling much more entitled to a bigger proportion of the trust or will, or even taking more money from the parent while they're still living, but often not being that interested in helping to take care of that parent should they become old or infirm. So it feels very unjust. It feels very imbalanced. It feels really awful, quite frankly. And many times the parents will enable the narcissistic sibling, oh, come now, it's nothing. Be nice to your brother or sister like you're still 6. And that can be really challenging. And sometimes siblings will have to break away from the entire family system because of a narcissistic sibling.
Let's talk about that. When you say break away, they mean no
They cut
contact.
off contact. They cut off contact.
Don't call me, don't text me.
Heartbreaking.
I'm not going to go to your nephew's baseball game anymore. We're out.
You know, because they're saying, well, your brother or sister stuck around. Why do you have to go if you're being too sensitive? And the entire family will band together and gaslight the person who says enough is enough. I'm not putting up with this anymore.
How can it get that bad where you are willing to lose your entire family over somebody's personality disorder?
You have no idea. I mean, it's all the stuff we talk about with narcissism. If you think about a narcissistic husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, the things they do, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the cruelty, the invalidation, the dehumanization. Sibling does else. It feels awful. Of course it feels awful from a sibling. They band with one or both parents and they'll even sort of gang up. That dynamic you had in childhood of being scapegoated may literally play out all the way into adulthood. And in many of these cases that I've worked with or seen, the siblings' only survival came from distancing themselves. Some of them haven't talked to their parents in 15 years, and it's largely because they're trying to keep distance from the narcissistic sibling. Many times it's a story that tells itself backwards. Like, I'm hearing more and more, I saw that. That's my mom. That's my dad. Like they said, I didn't know there was a word for this. I just thought I really had a tough mom or dad. So a lot of times people who think of their parents as difficult, selfish, challenging, not available, not present, neglectful. Those kinds of adjectives should be red flags that you might have actually had a narcissistic parent. And you know, I've always said, I don't care about the label. Call it what you will.
That's so important.
Yeah, call it what you will.
In case they haven't heard that, explain why the label doesn't really matter.
A lot of people get lost in like, are they narcissistic? I got to figure this out. As though they're giving a diagnosis.
Right.
The adjective by itself is not diagnostic. No. If you really experience from this parent that they were difficult and selfish and cruel, you know, just there was an antagonistic quality to them. If it felt like that, emotionally distant and invalidating and controlling a childhood, doesn't matter. It was still a miserable experience, and it's definitely something that shaped you. And that's the key. A parent shapes us. So now your personality is being shaped by a person who likely devalued emotion. I would say that over 90% of people who grew up in narcissistic family systems walk around with the mantra, I am not enough, haunting them for the rest of their lives.